This is Distant Replay, the podcast that goes back in time to relive all the greatest events that we witnessed in sports. From upsets, to championships, to cultural moments, we discuss it all. Coming up on today's episode.
All you gotta do is you go back to us losing in Game 7. I shook everybody's hand. 2 years in a row, we shook their hands when they beat us. There was a certain respect to the game that we paid to them. That's sportsmanship, no matter how much it hurts. And believe me, it hurt. But they didn't have to shake our hands. We knew we whipped their ass already. We got past them, and that was the most. That to me, that was better than, in some ways, winning a championship.
Welcome into Distant Replay Podcast. We usually go back and watch old games. Right now, we're watching The Last Dance, the documentary on 97-98 Chicago Bulls, their run really as a dynasty through the 90s and how they got there and all the pieces to that puzzle. And there's a lot of personalities. We get to learn more about Rodman in episode 4. His antics off the court get a little light shown on them. We'll also talk about Jordan and this Bulls team getting by the Pistons, what they had to do to get past the Pistons, which is pretty remarkable, how they changed really the way they went about preparing for basketball. And then also we got to look at Phil Jackson, the head coach. We know all about him, but how he came up in basketball, his career with the Knicks, how he began coaching, and really how he transformed this Bulls team. There's a lot to this episode, and we're about to dive into it all right here. I'm Ben George alongside Mike Noto. Again, you can find us on distantreplaypodcast.com. Hit subscribe to wherever you listen to this show and all of your podcasts. We'd love to have you leave a review as well. So, Mike, let's jump right into episode 4. We've already hit the first 3 episodes. Again, you can find all those at distantreplaypodcast.com or on YouTube as well. But this episode really starts off and picks back up with Rodman. This is a big part, big story, really for these Bulls teams in the 90s. But this kind of period, too, with 97-98 season, pretty remarkable that we begin with the fact that you talked about it last episode. Rodman's on the straight and narrow from about November, late November to early January. He's got about a month and a half of playing hard, doing the right thing, staying in line, showing up to practice. But then Pippen returns. Rodman needs a break from the game, and we get this 48 hours in Vegas. This story was awesome.
Yeah, so the way they told it in the documentary was great, that Phil Jackson and Rodman are in Phil Jackson's office. They call Jordan in and basically tell him that, hey, Dennis needs to go take a vacation. And they're sort of discussing the parameters of Rodman's let loose vacation. And they're sort of negotiating how long it's going to be for. They finally decide on 48 hours in Vegas, which based on the timeline they showed in the documentary ended up being about 4 days as opposed to 2 days.
Right.
And you're sitting there watching it, and the fact that you weren't surprised by it tells you all you need to know about Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, and so, he needed to just let loose for a while, right? So he goes out to Vegas, he's partying, doing whatever he's doing, and it looks like he's just on a rager, right? I mean, he looks like what you would do if, like, you and your boys went out right after college. You got a little bit of money. Obviously, you had more, but you have a little bit of money. You can go out and party and dance and drink and hit the clubs. And maybe like March Madness weekend, we're like, I'm going out for 4 days straight, and we're not going to ever go back to the hotel room. And that's basically what he did. And he had, by the way, Carmen Electra by his side. We talked about this relationship with Madonna. People forget about Rodman. This guy was dating some of the top women of the 80s and 90s, including Carmen Electra, who, 25 years later, Mike, she's still pretty strong.
Yeah, Carmen Electra. Update, still not ugly. I mean, she brought it, man. She was, let me tell you something. That was a surprise of the documentary for me, is that number one, she was in it, and number two, she might even look better than she did in the late 90s.
Yeah, it's very possible. But she was out there with them partying. But the thing finally came to an end. I mean, after 48 hours, Jordan knew. He's not going to be back in 48 hours. We can say 48 hours, Phil, but it's not going to happen. Jordan actually had to go out to Vegas and literally show up to Rodman's hotel room to track him down and bring him back to the team. A, it's remarkable that Jordan would do that. B, it shows you what kind of leader Jordan is. I mean, he's no nonsense. He's going to be the guy that makes that move. But then third, it shows you how important Rodman was to this team, that the best player in the game, maybe the best all time, is going to track you down and pull you back and bring you back to the locker room.
Yeah, and then how they just integrate Rodman right back in.
Yeah.
They go like nothing ever even happened. And that is the genius of Rodman, first of all, to be in the physical shape they talked about, where he came back and he was just still in shape somehow. Phil Jackson for navigating that with the team, right? I mean, that's a tough situation for a coach to be in. You have all the other players sitting here busting in it every day. This guy takes 4 days off and comes back. There could be some resentment, but Phil's kind of had the pulse of the team to know enough that they all understood Dennis had to do what he had to do. And when he came back, he'll come back, just from all angles. For them to navigate stuff like that is just one of those things that when you're following a team day to day, just watching games, you miss out on little things like this, that a season could take a turn either way with situations like this.
Yeah, well, first off, when he came back and you mentioned already in great shape, I thought it was great when they told the story of the Indian drill. And I don't know if you ever did this growing up. I did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I think we all did in that day and age. I don't know if they still do it. Probably changed the name of it for sure. But it would be where you run laps, right? Coach blows the whistle, person in the back runs to the front and leads the pack. And they keep doing that. Blow the whistle, you just keep running. And I love Jordan was like, look, guys, nobody run fast. You got Jackson just trying to get us back in shape, trying to punish Rodman a little bit, see where he is. Let's just take it easy. Rodman takes the lead. Leader sets the pace. Rodman takes off, starts sprinting. Coach blows the whistle. It takes him 4 laps to track down Rodman and regain the lead and slow the pace back up. The stories like that, I think, are just tell you so much about who Rodman is and really give you a look into what this team was like and dealing day to day with all those different pieces, as you mentioned, trying to just manage what you had going on there. It was just crazy. But the fact that Rodman could still do that after a 4-day bender in Vegas is remarkable.
Yeah, but you have the guys on a 4-day bender. Think about all the stuff we've seen with Rodman in the last 2 episodes. You got a 4-day bender in Vegas with Carmen Electra. You got him doing whatever he did in San Antonio, coloring his hair, dating Madonna. You got him where he had a mysterious they found him sleeping in Detroit in the arena parking lot in a car with a gun in his hand.
Yeah.
Right? You got all this stuff going on. And mind you, the guy is still averaging between 15 and 18 rebounds a game while he's doing all this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like that's why everyone dealt with him though, right? Because his production wasn't slipping.
Yeah.
You got all this stuff going on. And it's incredible. He was able, when you look back on it, able to juggle all these balls in the air and still be productive on the court.
Yeah, you knew he was going to bring it when he came. I mean, that's what they all said. We knew that Rodman would show up and he would be playing hard every time he showed up, and that's probably why Jordan loved him so much and got along and tolerated him, because he knew he was so competitive, wanted to win championships. I mean, that was the reason why they all got along so well together. But it is remarkable how that all transpired. And I don't remember, did they touch on it at all about, like, what was the front-facing story when Rodman was gone? Like, what did everybody think was going on at that time? Do you remember? Did they say that?
What they told the rest of the team? I don't know.
Or like our fans. Like, what were they were saying on TV when the Bulls were playing and Rodman wasn't there? Is Rodman?
They didn't go over that, but they didn't go. I don't think they went over that, but it was just funny how everyone involved, whether it was Phil Jackson, Jordan, Rodman, Pippen, they all referred to it as his vacation.
Yeah,
it's so funny. Like he worked a regular 9-to-5 job and he took some PTO or something.
Yeah, he's got days he's got to use them, coach. I mean, right? You know, like, I mean, like and to think that something like that could happen today, I mean, it never would. I mean, you could never disappear and just kind of fall off and resurface somewhere and just go about your life. And people that saw him out there probably were telling their friends about it, but the word didn't spread beyond that. You didn't have a way to spread it beyond that, so you could go and do that. But I just wonder what the Bulls TV broadcast was saying over that week that he was basically gone. You know, is he out? He's just, we don't know his status, personal reasons, whatever it was. But meanwhile, this guy's banging out kamikazes in Vegas, like, to the tune of probably like 15 to 20 a day. Who knows?
And he's in the Chicago Bulls parking lot, taking off on his motorcycle with a Miller Lite in his hand.
It's with the police escort, right?
Yeah, what a legend.
The rules that he lived by, nobody else did, for sure, for Rodman. But, that was a big part of this episode. Also, we got to look at Phil Jackson, the head coach, and we got to see his background. Remarkable. We had footage of him in college playing and the little jump hook that he had. But we saw him with the Knicks a little bit, kind of got the feel of his career as a player, and then transitioning into coaching. And his path that he took really was remarkable. He was coaching in, was it Puerto Rico he was coaching in? And then transitioned to Canada?
Yeah, he went from the Puerto Rican Basketball League, which I'm assuming does not exist today, and I had never even heard of it before. But he goes from coaching there to the CBA in Albany, right? New York.
Yeah.
And then he makes his way as an assistant to Doug Collins with the Bulls.
Do you think there was any point shaving going on in the Puerto Rico League? It seemed like
Who knows what was going on. Did you see? Didn't they tell a story about one of the coaches shot the ref in the leg with a gun or something like that?
Yep.
Like all this chaos going on where it was a real physical league. And Jackson just telling these stories from this league, but it sounds like he learned a lot. Who knows what he learned, but it just sounded like complete chaos. Maybe it got him it sort of hardened his shell a little bit to deal with Rodman years later.
Yeah, there's no question about that. So that was kind of his coaching path, but we got to see who he was as a person and kind of a guy, and his different way of doing things, and his really kind of spiritual approach to the game, and the meditation that he would do, and he'd bring those principles and practices to the team, and to practice and warm ups and stretching and the meditation, all that stuff he would kind of work in. But he was a big part of his team, and really to go from Doug Collins to Phil, I didn't think much about it back then. It just seemed like, Phil was the guy. It was a pretty clear cut. Phil was the coach that needed to lead this team. At least that's kind of how I remember it. But that transition from Collins to Phil was really a huge move by Krause to make, because it seemed like Collins and Jordan were really close.
Yeah, Collins and Jordan were really close. Krause brings in Tex Winter, who, if you know anything about Tex Winter, he was with Phil Jackson with the Bulls and with the Lakers. And it was sort of the architect of the triangle offense, which is the coaching strategy that Phil Jackson is known for. And you had this push and pull where Krause wanted Collins to adopt the triangle offense. Collins was very resistant to it, did more of an isolation offense with Jordan. And eventually, Jackson and Tex Winter won that power struggle. And Krause wanted the offense to move into more of a free-flowing, share the ball type of offense that Phil Jackson, let's face it, for Phil Jackson to get that job, he had to embrace that style of offense. And that's really what took the Bulls, and particularly the role players on the Bulls, to a level where they could compete better with the Pistons of the world.
Yeah, and that was a big part of it. I mean, and I thought it was pretty great the way they showed the triangle offense and kind of how the movement worked, and really kind of got a good look at it. I don't remember ever really kind of seeing it broken down the way that it was in this documentary. Maybe I just haven't paid much attention along the way, but I just thought I got a different look at exactly how the triangle offense operated and kind of the free-flowing movement that you kind of saw during the games.
Yeah, those were good. Those when they showed Tex Winter talking about it and sort of the figures moving around on the blackboard.
Yeah.
And then they showed it actually in the game and how it worked. That was pretty interesting. And remember, they fired Doug Collins, a month or two after they reached the Eastern Conference Finals. So it's not like this is a team that wasn't – they ascended with Doug Collins. They were getting better, but the front office felt that, hey, in order for us to reach the ultimate pinnacle, we need to make this move. And, again, a very risky move. It turns out they had the perfect person to slide into for Doug Collins. But when your star player has a really good relationship like Jordan did with Collins, that's a gutsy move to make. It's
incredibly gutsy, because you're right. You're dead on. I mean, these Bulls teams were taking steps every year forward, like pretty big steps too. I mean, they went from being a very bad team before Jordan, which we saw early on in this documentary. But they went from being a very, very bad team to winning 30 games, 40 games, 50 games. They're progressing each year, going deeper in the playoffs each year, and they get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So the fact that they pulled the plug on Collins at that point is crazy. And I don't think you would see anything like that today. And I think if you did, you just hear so much second guessing, so much blowback. I don't think a team might even do that just because of the feedback they would get, right? Having to deal with social media in that time frame before you could even find out the results of the decision, you'd already have been judged in that time frame. And it'd just be so difficult to weather that storm that I don't know if I would do that. But the fact that they made this move and it turned out to be a game changer is, again, it speaks to Jerry Krause. I mean, as much as you want to diss him for what he did during this process, and maybe he couldn't handle the stardom that everybody else was getting besides him, but he made some pretty remarkable moves that put them in position to do what they did during this time frame. And we also kind of see too during this, and part of with Phil Jackson taking over, we get to see that the Bulls, after a second loss now to the Pistons, they lose back-to-back years, the conference finals to the Pistons. The second one goes 7 games. Pistons win, first year under Phil. And at this point, they say, okay, we got to do something different. What we're doing right now is not working against this style of basketball that the Pistons are bringing. And the Pistons aren't changing. The Pistons are going to play this way till somebody beats them. And they went into the offseason and decided to work out. And now you think about it and go, wait, what? Like, isn't a huge workout regime like part of every player and every team's, kind of day-to-day? But you saw Jordan, a young, early, mid-'80s Jordan, was a skinny, dynamic, athletic, explosive player. But from that point forward, he kind of turned into this physical, stronger, more filled out Michael Jordan. It all started there. And I didn't realize that change had ever occurred, that evolution by the Bulls, but it changed completely who they were as a team.
It sure did. They just embraced the physical training aspect of the game more. And it's what they felt they needed to do, like you said, to overtake the Pistons. And that Game 7 against the Pistons in the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals, I don't know if you noticed, just Jordan that was the game where Scottie Pippen was not himself because he had a really, really bad migraines to the point where Pippen said he had trouble seeing or he's seeing double, and he was really not himself. And when they mentioned that to Jordan, you could sort of see Jordan still mad about those migraines Scottie had, and that, it still kind of baffles him. And it always makes me think, when I think about the relationship between Jordan and Pippen, they had obviously a relationship based on respect. I know they've respected each other, and I know they know that they needed each other. But I always wonder, like, because of situations like that, like Jordan's reaction to the migraine, like, how close are they really?
Well, that and also, with the way he handled the injury for 97, 98. I mean, there's a few moments like this that, yeah, you kind of wonder. And Jordan said he was the best teammate he ever played with. I mean, he said that in one of the previous episodes. But you also kind of wonder, is there some kind of underlying like fire kind of just smoldering in the background there towards Pippen? And is there any kind of resentment, or just does he feel like does he respect Pippen, I guess maybe? Does he respect him at that level that you might just assume that he does because of how great they were together for so many years? I mean, we'll never know that, but I think it's a fair question.
Yeah, it's these little things that Phil Jackson is navigating while he's coaching these teams that he doesn't get enough credit for. The relationship between Jordan and Pippen, integrating Rodman into the team, when taking over for Doug Collins. Like, you see it throughout the sort of 8-year run here with the Bulls. And, a lot of people say with Phil Jackson, well, he went from Jordan and Pippen to Kobe and Shaq. How hard is it to win with that talent?
Right.
Sure, but he had a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with both these teams that, again, there was a lot of times in these seasons where the seasons could have gone either way. And his overall mentality and how he kept everyone together really showed through as a strong point.
It did. And when we finished this season off, and we had that Game 7, the migraine game, and in Jordan's defense, he didn't really, he didn't take any shots at Pippen, but you could kind of sense there was something there. But they go in the offseason, they start working out. They went immediately, almost like the next day. They were in the gym working towards beating the Pistons, and it shows you what kind of effort and determination it takes to be great, like truly great. And that's an example of it, the working nonstop to change and get better and evolve. And they go in the offseason, and it is remarkable now to think back on this point. And there was actually a time, Mike, in the history of the NBA, where there were a lot of people that didn't know if Jordan could finish the deal. Didn't know if Jordan was a winner. Didn't know if Jordan could win the big game. That was the storyline. That was the storyline after that conference finals. And you're only talking about, sure, we're now 6 years into Jordan's career, but they're taking steps forward every year, right? And you turned one of the worst franchises in basketball into one of the best franchises in basketball. You're right there on the verge, right? They lose in the semifinals 4-1. They lose in the conference finals 4-2. The next year they lose 4-3. They're getting closer every time. And I don't think you can necessarily look at Jordan. He did miss one of those big free throws in one of those games in the regulation that would have won the game. They ended up losing in overtime, which I didn't think I'd ever see Jordan miss a clutch shot like that. But this is a storyline right now. Can Jordan win the big game?
Huge storyline. And it was a hey, we're expecting this guy to be the next Magic or the next Bird, but when's he going to show us that he'd actually get over the hump and win a championship? And that's the kind of backdrop that led to the focus that this team had, like you mentioned, in the gym the next day after they lose to the Pistons, and they sort of kept that focus, throughout the 91 season. And this 91 season comes to a head with them meeting who else but the Pistons again in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, and this Bulls team was a powerhouse. They had a great regular season. They beat the Knicks 3-0 in the first round. They beat the Sixers 4-1 in the second. Then they face off with the Pistons again, the rematch that they wanted. They've been working for and working towards all year long. And they get in that matchup with the Pistons, and they don't back down a lick. And the Pistons try to do what they do, and it does not affect the Bulls one bit. The Bulls end up sweeping the Pistons 4-0, ending their run as back-to-back world champions. And on top of that, Mike, you had the ending to this series with the Pistons walking off the court. And this is one of the best moments, I think, of the documentary, was them showing Jordan the video of this afterwards, because this is a big deal. They just walked off the court, didn't shake hands with time still left on the clock. And the Bulls were just like, wait, what are these guys doing? And they hated him for it. And to this day, Isaiah tried to defend it, saying that this is kind of what happened back then, right? The Celtics did it to us. This is kind of how you handled their business. Meanwhile, these guys, knowing the way the Pistons play, not a lot of respect for their organization, the way that they approach basketball, then this happens. Jordan is still pissed off to this day.
Yeah, because you had that sort of take stage as the main thing people remember from this series. Like, this was a big moment for the Bulls because you had the Pippins of the world, the Horace Grant, B.J. Armstrong sort of take it to the next level, become the supporting cast Jordan needed. They put all the pieces together. They sweep the Pistons. But now what the series is known for is the Pistons taking the childish way out and leaving the court with 8 seconds left. And the best was when they were going to show Jordan the video of Isaiah Thomas talking about this in present day. Jordan saying, basically, I don't care what he says, because he's had 30 years to reflect on it, and he's probably going to regret doing it, but I know what he meant back in that time period and where his heart's at. And it's exactly what Jordan said Isaiah was going to say. He did. And this is the disconnect with Isaiah that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And it's why people didn't like those Pistons teams back in the day. And look, Horace Grant's reaction was great. Called them, quote, straight up bitches for leaving the court early, which I thought was really funny. And, this is one of those moments where, again, we talked about it last episode, where we think of the Pistons very few times for their play on the court, and you think of incidents like this.
Yeah, and this was this also was a result of, or this resulted in now Isaiah ultimately not making that dream team, right? This factors into that, because Jordan essentially, you hear all the stories now, essentially kept Isaiah off that dream team in 92. And he was, Isaiah should have been a member of that team. He was one of the greatest players in the game right then, but he was good friends with Magic Johnson, if you remember back in the day too. Yeah. Isaiah. And they were great friends, and he was not on that team. And the whole kind of the story with that is that Jordan was basically like, we're not bringing him on this team. He's not a part of this team. And because of that, Isaiah was not a part of one of the greatest teams, the greatest team ever assembled in that dream team, and went on to blow everybody out, win a gold medal. And that kind of, this is part of it. That's part of that story, but it just shows you and you learn that through this course of this documentary, Jordan doesn't let things go very easily.
No,
and he doesn't. High on that list too is Isaiah and this Pistons team. I don't know that he dislikes anybody or any team as much as this group.
Yeah, his reaction, we'll see what he thinks of Reggie Miller. I'm kind of interested to hear that a little bit later. I'm sure they'll get to that later in the documentary, but his dislike for the Pistons and mostly Isaiah is very, very, very personal. You could tell he's, you got to remember, Isaiah is from Chicago.
Yeah.
And that was largely Isaiah's city before Jordan came along and took the whole league and the city by storm. So I think there was some resentment for that sort of in the backdrop also with these two. But look, it's just, you could still tell today these guys are not exchanging pleasantries if they ever see each other on the street.
And I think too, when I'm thinking about the story and kind of the time period and just kind of putting everything together, we heard this a couple times from Jordan, wanted to be in that club with Magic and Bird, right? Wanted to be included in that championship club, taking that step to be associated with those winners. And I kind of feel like, much like the NBA thought the Bulls needed to take that throne and become that new team, I think Jordan kind of felt like this is my time too. And I'm being kept away from that by this team that not only, is beating us and knocking us off, but they're doing it in the way they're doing it, right? I mean, they're kind of taking what's mine by doing it unconventionally and really not with very much sportsmanship at all, right? I mean, it's different when you're playing with hard fouls versus just intentionally fouling guys constantly. It's a little bit different. And I think you kind of get that sense that that's an extra kind of layer to why Jordan hates this team so much, is because they were in his way of what he probably felt like was his, like rightfully his in that moment. And they took that away and they did it. And the way they did it really kind of rubbed him the wrong way. Then to finish it all off, when he said that Eastern Conference Finals win was probably our championship victory more so than that finals win that came right after it. And they kind of put that all together. And I think this is a combination of all those factors is why he has such a hatred. And he even said the hatred burns today for that team, which is crazy 30 years later, after he even knocked them off and took them down. That still lives today. But you see that, and I think what was great too, Mike, post victory, they win their first one, and you see Jordan's emotional, and nobody had seen that side of Jordan either. I thought that was really cool to hear that story. Jordan, always a guy that was getting on his teammates, very competitive, fired up, angry. You always saw that side of him. You never saw the emotional, the soft-sided, the passion that he really had for basketball and for being that champion.
Yeah, this is the 91 finals. The Bulls beat the Lakers 4-1 in the series after losing game one. And, now history looks back on this series differently, but that was a Lakers team that I think won over 60 games. You still had Magic playing at a very high level. And, the popular thinking was not that the Bulls were going to win in 5 games. Again, the Bulls, just like a buzzsaw, went right through them in games 2 through 5. And just like you said, the other players talking about how surprised they were, how emotional Jordan was a big takeaway of this episode for me. Them sort of seeing him as a human for the first time was I think a big switch in how his teammates viewed him.
Yeah, and you got the iconic image of him holding that trophy, kind of crying into that NBA championship trophy. His dad was in the locker room. We kind of got to see that relationship a little bit more. But just that moment where he became a champion, and I know, erasing all the doubts, surprisingly, the doubts that were out there that whether or not he could win this title. And he did everything he had to do and willed his team to victory to win this championship was pretty awesome to see. And this really opened the floodgates for what was to come. But they head back to Chicago on the plane. And I loved the video of them dancing and celebrating on the plane. And there's your boy Jerry Krause, looking like a cartoon character, dancing on the plane with those guys. I thought that was hilarious.
So that was great. So that was after, I believe him dancing on the plane was after the Pistons series.
Okay.
I believe. Right? But so you want to put in perspective how much the Bulls and Michael Jordan specifically hated those Pistons teams. It made them laugh and have fun with Jerry Krause. That's how much they hated those Pistons teams. Because Jerry Krause is dancing on the plane, and they're all saying, "Go Jerry, go Jerry." Right. It was so funny. Just to have the camera on the plane for that moment was hilarious. again, like that's how much they hated the Pistons. Like they thought they laughed with Jerry Krause.
Yeah, old Jerry. Jerry was great and a caricature really of himself. Honestly, when you're kind of watching that, so that's, I guess, wraps up the episode, Mike. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else from that episode that I wanted to mention. But I guess the last thing I'll kind of leave it with, and if you have any other thoughts, feel free to add them. But this episode wraps up with kind of a preview of what's to come. Both, now I think we're going to get a look at these championship Bulls teams, kind of what was going on with these teams, some of the guys that were involved. We're going to get a look at Horace Grant coming up, which I think is going to be awesome. Because they had some things to say about Horace and him kind of talking to the media. We're going to get into that part. But then you also have, fast forward to the current last team, current timeline, you have Jerry Krause now saying, essentially, at the All-Star break, making comments about this team, the future of this team, will Jordan be playing next year on this team? And basically saying, no, he's going to have to find a new team next year. And that's kind of where we leave it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable because, I just went through this good moment with Jerry Krause on the plane. This is like 5 minutes before the end of the documentary that we're talking about right now. We were like, oh, wow, what an awesome moment for Jerry Krause. And within 5 minutes, he completely blows that to smithereens with out-of-nowhere comments right before the All-Star break, right before they're about to play the Jazz, by the way, who are the second-best team in the league at this point. And he makes these comments again. It's like sort of like he thinks he's asked a question and he has to answer it 100% truthfully.
Right.
It's like this is his first year on the job. We're in year like 14 of him being the GM here. And, and it's like you said, I think this is sort of going to lead into a storyline for next week's episode.
But he always just has to be, he always has to let people know that he's the one running the show, right? He's the one in power. Ultimately, he's the guy, right? I don't, forget about Jordan and Phil and Pippen. They answer to me. He's got to make that point as often as he can, and he just can't take the fact that he's not getting all the credit with these Bulls teams. Instead of just enjoying what he's going through and sitting back and saying, what, I helped put together one of the greatest runs in basketball. Let's let this thing work as long as possible. He's worried about being the guy that gets the credit. He's worried about being in front of all this and he's just jealous. You can kind of get that sense, and it's pretty remarkable that he's saying the greatest player ever has got to play somewhere else next year in the middle of a season, in the middle of them going for a three-peat. So that's where we leave it. I look forward to where we're going because I think we've gotten a really good background of all the key elements to this Pistons team. We'll maybe find out a little bit more about some of the other players on this roster, but now we get to see what it's like during these championship years and what else they had to navigate, because we saw what they had to do to get to this first one. There's other things going on year in, year out, especially with Rodman. You got Pippen, that relationship, all that's happening. We're going to get to find that out over the next, we still got 6 episodes left, Mike.
Yeah, I think we're going to get more into the behind the scenes of the 97-98 season. And just, again, more into those, the first three-peat years here. And I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Distant Replay. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the show, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is. Make sure you subscribe. The next one will be out next week. We're going to have, again, 2 more episodes recapping episodes 5 and 6 of The Last Dance. And we'll also have them up on YouTube. Check it out there. You can follow us on Twitter at distantpodcast.com. And pretty soon we'll also get back into watching old games as well, which is what we normally do on this show. But in the meantime, we're enjoying this like everybody else is. This is incredible TV, learning about one of the great teams, the teams that we grew up with in our youth. And it's been a lot of fun to see these stories. So we look forward to episodes to come. Thanks for listening to Distant Replay Podcast. We will talk to you here on the next episode.